Well, joining us now in the studio to break down some of these recent events in Washington is veteran journalist Calev Ben David. Calev, great to have you with us. To start, what's your response to the meeting that we saw in the White House? Well,
this was a surprise meeting in a way. It was at the last second, and I think there were some surprises for Prime Minister Netanyahu there. They just look at the sort of the contrast between this meeting and their last meeting a couple of months ago, which really went well for Prime Minister Netanyahu. Here, there were some challenging developments, I think, for Israel, for the Prime Minister, especially the announcement of the talks with Iran. First of all, just the fact that it was a surprise. Everybody assumed that Israel and the U.S. were in complete coordination, certainly on possible military action and the military buildup in the region. And then the talks, then suddenly there's a surprise announcement of talks in Amman. So just the fact that it's a surprise. Now, the result of the talks could be positive for Israel, but it really depends on what the parameters are going to be. Clearly, it's going to be a challenge to get Iran to totally dismantle its nuclear program. But Israel has other interests. The ballistic missile program of Iran. What about Iran's funding and support of groups like the Houthis? So everything depends there on what are the parameters, how these talks develop. But clearly, I do think that was an unpleasant surprise for Prime Minister Netanyahu.
Well, it certainly seems that way. I mean, when it comes to these nuclear negotiations or these talks that are taking place, we see the regime saying, no, we didn't agree to direct talks. And we see the Trump administration saying, yes, they did. And now there's sort of this turn in the Ayatollah's words that, OK, yeah, we're having talks, but not direct talks. Is there a deal that can actually be made between these two clearly very egoistic actors?
I mean, there is a deal that could be made. The question is if that deal would fulfill any of the, first of all, hopes of Israel, that it would be a real end to Iran's nuclear weapons program, whether President Trump can get more than what President Obama could get. Obviously, if he offered the same deal, the Iranians would probably agree. But certainly for Israel, sees that as just a flawed deal that really didn't stop Iran. And for the Iranians to give more than, for example, they gave to the Obama administration, they don't seem to have shown any flexibility for that. And of course, there are these other issues involved, as I've said, supporting these terror groups like Hezbollah and the Houthis. And again, it's interesting, the choice of Steve Witkoff is going to supposedly be representing in what are going to initially be indirect talks. Apparently, one of Oman's, I think, foreign minister, deputy foreign minister will mediate, and then they could move to direct talks. But you would hope that someone like Secretary of State Rubio, he's been quite hawkish on the Iranians and distrustful of them, that he would be involved in the talks. Maybe at a later stage he will.
Well, we'll have to follow that closely. I want to change gears a little bit and ask you about these tariffs. What are the impact of these tariffs on the state of Israel? We know it's one of the issues that Netanyahu went to Washington to discuss with Trump.
Right. Another unpleasant surprise, because prior to this, the Prime Minister had guaranteed that Israel would remove all tariffs on U.S. goods, which would itself be something significant in the Israeli economy. But apparently that is not enough. President Trump has made clear, not just in Israel, it's not the issue of tariffs, but trade deficits that he wants to either greatly reduce or equalize. Emily, Israel's trade deficit with the United States is $7.4 billion in Israel's favor. And you'd expect it to be a small country trading with a much bigger, much richer country. You'd expect that to be a little imbalanced. It would be very difficult for Israel to equalize, even shorten that in any short period of time. And that means Israel's going to be hit with these tariffs, and that's going to be a shock to the Israeli economy on top of the other shocks, which is what we're seeing, for example, in the Israeli stock market.
Well, we are almost out of time, but I just wanted to get your take on this whole we're going to own Gaza thing. Is he serious? Is this a negotiating tactic? What's your take?
It's hard to say. I think that's his desire. I think it's more of a negotiating tactic at this point. I would say that was the one positive aspect of the meeting for Prime Minister Netanyahu, in that some people anticipated Trump may have pressured him to accept an immediate deal, maybe the Egyptian compromise deal that's now being proposed, which could have been politically problematic for the prime minister. So it didn't seem that he was pressuring, that Trump was pressuring, that we know, to take that deal. So some breathing room for Prime Minister Netanyahu on that. But in terms of how Trump sees it, I think he would like to see the U.S. own Gaza. But at this stage, it's more realistic as a negotiating tactic than as something we're going to see.
Absolutely. All right, Calev Ben David, thank you for your insights today.
Pleasure.